Buongiorno, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come here and spend 1 hour to talk about Azure Active Directory. Well, talk. Actually, listening to the hippie talking about it. That would be me. My name is Vittorio Bertocci. I am a program manager in the Active Directory team, and my day job is to think about developer experience. And that's what I'm going to chat about today. I'm going to spend some time exploring with you the notion of taking advantage of Active Directory for securing your rich client applications, native clients, mobile clients, all that kind of stuff. Now, when you think about Active Directory, probably you don't think about hip stuff, Lady Gaga, or modern things. Active Directory is very much still in the collective imagery the thing that was created in the late 90s. It was created in the late 90s for managing the resources of the time. And that was a different world with different kind of resources, and we were all different. Or at least I was very different at the time, as you can tell. And I did have better pictures, but they were all with the ladies that I dated at the time. My wife claims that my videos are boring, so she never watches them. I could have used it, but just in case, just to be safe. Anyway, that was me in the late 90s, and that was my phone. In Italy, mobile phones were all the rage. It was really a status symbol. So in '98, I paid like a stupid amount of money for that D470. Guess how many apps run on that phone? One, the phone. You could use it as a phone. And Active Directory only cared about it to the extent of which I could put my number if somebody needed to reach me in there. So clearly, today, the world is different. So let's spend a few moments to understand how it is different. What are the resources that we used at the time, that the businesses used at the time? Of course, every business is built around people. So first resource that you needed to take it into account. Then we had the PCs. People used the PCs for doing their work. And then you had all kind of this stuff still applies today, by the way. You had all kind of resources like mail servers, any Oxygen service which you needed to run your business, which at the time ran on premises, and still today, a lot of them are. And then low-level considerations like, for example, storage. Now, what was the role of, I say Active Directory, I should say generic directory, but given that it has such an enormous market share, I feel I can say Active Directory. But if you like to think in a generic architectural term, just think directory. There is nothing wrong with that. The role of Active Directory was the glue to keep it all together. Like if you take all of those resources on their own, they are disparate, they are different. Like Active Directory provided the lattice, the glue, the fabric, which allowed people to work with that. Administrators to administer those things, as the word says. Developers to manipulate the representations of those objects in the directory so that they could actually take advantage of that. And I would say that that's still something that we want to do today. The thing that changed is the nature of the resources that we are playing with and the way in which we consume them. So let's take the then and copy it on this side, and let's see how it changed today. Specifically, to use a platitude, I'll say that the boundary of your enterprise became porous. Like when you go to the office, you find some of the resources that you need, but a lot of the resources that you use for working live outside. So you have lots and lots of different devices that you own and might not be managed by your enterprise, and yet you want to use them in order to make your work. And then on the other dimension, there are all these services which now run in the cloud. Now, if you wanted to have your email and you don't want to worry about maintaining your exchange, you just buy it as a service. And who cares on the hardware in which it's running as long as you are getting email? And that's one aspect of one resource which you must manage, you want to use in your applications, because that's where the value of your company is, in how people spend their time, the documents that they do, the intelligence which is in all those emails, and any other service that you have. As a developer, if you're writing an application for a business, you must have a way of connecting to that. And the same goes for everything else, like compute, like you can buy compute power, you can buy hosting capabilities, all things that are yours, you are paying for it, but you are not the custodian of it. Somebody else owns the pipe. So the Active Directory in the classic sense didn't have a representation for these things. So the thing that I'm going to try to show you today is how Windows Azure Active Directory, let me just make it a bit more cloudy, and voila, is going to help you by providing that representation and providing a programming model and tools which allow you to target these platforms from your rich clients. And with rich clients, of course, I don't mean only Microsoft. We also see, as you can see, I invested my little salary here to buy one of these guys. OK, so there's how I wanted to explain things. And if you guys have a better idea, I'm all ears. First, I'll start to describe the application model. Hopefully, that won't be too slow. Then we'll take a look at OAuth and how OAuth applies to AAD. How many of you guys ever used OAuth? Can you extend your arm to its full length? Thank you. Lots of you. So for you guys, this stuff will be boring. But for everybody else, it will be a revelation. This is finally how OAuth works, and especially how it works in here. And to make it slightly more practical, I will actually show you code on Windows Phone 8.1. It just came out today, so very fresh. Then we'll see how you don't really have to put yourself through all that code, because we have libraries which help you to do the same stuff that the entire app, as you'll see in a moment, performs in just a couple of lines of code. And here it's not just a matter of convenience, it's also a matter of like peace of mind, because you can be reasonably confident that we put some, how to say, domain-specific knowledge in that library, so hopefully we did less errors than if you would implement it from scratch. Then we look at something which is actually not possible with most of the other OAuth providers. The OAuth providers usually supply a technique for protecting their own resources. Like if you get a token from Facebook, you have to spend that token with the Facebook graph. With Azure Active Directory, you can definitely get tokens for first-party resources, Office 365, the directory in itself, Azure itself. But you can also take your own APIs and protect them exactly in the same way, which is very handy. And you'll see that it's very straightforward. And then, if we have time, we will not have time, we'll talk a bit about multi-tenancy. But the good news is that we are about to flood the gate and have many samples around. And also tomorrow, I will have another talk. And if I don't bore you to death today, and if you're still interested, some of these high-level themes, I'll reprise them tomorrow. Does that sound fair? You said it. You can't go and the evil saying, oh, not as specified. But before we go in the actual talk, it is my honor and privilege to announce that today we released Azure Active Directory Premium. Windows Azure Active Directory Premium is a premium SKU. All the features that I will show today are based on the free tier. If you have Azure, you can also do all the things that I'll show. But, for example, there is not a huge SLA. And instead, with Azure Active Directory Premium, you get SLA. If you want to use multiple authentication factors, you still write applications the way I'll show you. But if you get Premium, you'll light up automatically those capabilities without having to change your code. And then there are a bunch of interesting things for administrators. I'm assuming that you are all developers. Who's an administrator? Come on, come out. 1, 2, 3. Okay, you can say. No, you can say at your risk, because this will be very developer-centric. But of course, I'm joking. But there are many other features which I will not list today. At the end, we'll have links, and you can go and find out. It's great. Like, we've been waiting for this moment for a long time, and I'm so glad that we are finally out. OK, so now let's start in earnest. And let's talk about our model. Now, you might not be surprised by the fact that a directory contains users. And putting them there mostly for showing you that the approach that we use with the applications is very coherent, is very directory. And you have users, and in the directory parlance, normally an entity is referred to as a principal. So we have principals for users. And then these users can be, let's say, of course, more than one. And they can be, like the directory can capture the fact that they live in groups. They can have a relationship, like one can be a manager of the other. They can belong to the same business area, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm going to talk basically not at all about users. These are just for balance, because I need the three things. I'm instead going to talk a lot about applications. Now, you be warned. In this talk, I'm going to make some simplifications, because I wanted to explain the mobile application angle. Now, the Active Directory model is very, very powerful, can do lots of things, including applications that run on the server. I'm going to pretend that those things don't exist today and simplify accordingly. Then if tomorrow you'll come to the other session, you'll see the simplification on the other angle. But all the things that I'm going to say are all actionable. You can apply them and live a productive life without knowing that that other stuff exists. I'm just warning you in case you say, you are lying to us. That's by design. So say that you have a resource, server-side. This could be one of your resources. This could be one resource provided by Microsoft, Office, SharePoint, Exchange, your own web API. Now, the directory needs to know about this resource. So for every application which is a resource, you need to create one entry, or you will find one entry in the directory. This entry contains coordinates that this app uses when you interact with that app using certain protocols. So if you want to use OAuth, there will be one identifier and one specific return URI which is associated to that application. And this entry will live in there, in what we call the application principal. Now, given that this is a resource which you can access, there is another very important category of information, which is what we call permissions. Every resource must have a list of the things that you can do with that resource. So if it's Exchange, an example of a permission could be can read user's email. Another is can read calendar. Another is I can send mail as that user. And yet another, I have a full control over the mailbox of a user. Those are all examples of resources. Resources are divided, permissions. Permissions are divided in two big categories. There are permissions which are available to unwashed masses, the users. The user can always say, well, sure, go ahead, read my own mail. And that's what we call a user consent permission. And so if you create an app which needs that permission, a user can grant it to you. Then there are what we call admin-level permissions. Those are things that only the administrator can grant because those have consequences beyond the specific resource. If it's something to the effect of like, write on the directory, well, wait a minute. The user might think that it's OK, but the administrator might beg to differ. So we have these two different levels. Now, we have another category in here, which is, again, something which describes an application, but this time it is the client counterpart. It is an application which consumes a resource. And as such, it needs to list what are the apps that it wants to talk with and what it wants to do with it. So that's pretty straightforward, right? Not especially complicated. Yes, no, maybe, go away. Personal attacks, comments on my hair. No. Good, I'm glad you are alive. Anyway, this is the basis, and I'm glad it's simple because we'll build upon it for the entire rest of the talk. So let's actually look at how we use this thing. Say that we have our nondescript tablet, and we want to use it for creating an application which works with email. There I have my directory, what we call our directory tenant. Azure Active Directory is a multi-tenant system, so you'll hear me say tenant or directory interchangeably. It just means your directory. Like if you have an organization, you are a customer, the directory that you find on the portal is your tenant. And in there, since you bought Office 365 Access, you will find among all the resources that you have, also the Exchange Online resource. And here you can see the list of possible permissions. And as you can see, there is one that is admin level, and all the other ones are user level. Now, let's add one application. So here I have my application on my phone, tablet, whatever. Now, what do I need? I need an entry for this application, right? And here it is. Here I create a new entry in my directory, and I also have to specify which resources, but let's not do it yet. Let's actually do this. Let's go to the portal, let's create one entry for the application. Now, the portal is a classic Windows Azure portal. How many of you guys use Windows Azure? Thank you. As a shareholder, I am delighted. Thank you. Let me think. Here, I'm always terrified to type my password in a place where you can see, and then having to interrupt the talk and go to change it quickly before you do bad things to my inbox. So, because of course, with a password, you don't need permissions. What I'm doing here is I'm going straight to the Active Directory section of the portal because I saved my little bookmark. And as you can see, or maybe not, because it's not very big. Let me zoom a bit. Here I have a number of directories. I'm using this account for my development purposes, so I created many test directories. And I'm going to pick one, which I called not very creatively developer tenant. Let me get to a smaller size. And then I can just go on my application tab, where there is the list of all my applications. Here there are applications I created, the one that say developer tenant, and others that I bought. This one, Office 365 Exchange, is from Microsoft, so I bought it. So let's create a new application. Here I just needed to do a couple of steps. I will call my application like my mega client, because I'm on a roll. And here I have two choices. I can choose to create a server-side resource, or I can be a client. I'll be a client. And here I just needed to provide a little protocol detail, which is the URL where I will listen to tokens coming back. Doesn't need to be an actual URL. It's just an identifier. Don't worry too much about it. We'll never see this again. Not really. We'll see it again. And now the system just goes and creates my app. And look, just that we created it. If I go and configure, here there is the list of coordinates that my app requires. For example, here there is a client ID. The ones among you that know how to use OAuth know that client ID is necessary for asking a token on behalf of this app. Here there is my very interesting return URI. And here is another interesting part, which I'll get to in a second. So now I created my entry. I needed to say to the system that this application needs access to Exchange. Easy. I go back to the portal. Actually, let me do it in here. Here, I want Exchange, and specifically, I want the read user's mail permission. So let's go to the portal. And here I have my list of applications. Here there is Exchange. Here there is the list of permissions. Read user's email. As you can see, there is this little thing, which means that it didn't save yet. Click Save. Now it thinks a bit about it. Hopefully not too long. And voila. Now the system knows that my application needs to talk to Exchange. Great. So now let's talk about how actually the interaction happens. We know from all the wife tales that if we needed to access a resource, we need to present a security token for getting it in there. And we know that in this case, Exchange, we say in technical terms, trust Azure Active Directory, as in the token has to come from there. And specifically, it has to come from your own organization. Now, auth defines two different endpoints for enabling this flow. The first endpoint is called the authorization endpoint. Auth was born on the web as a way of obtaining delegated access from one website to get access to another website without ever sharing the resources in a, let's say, unduly manner. So the way in which auth does user interaction, which means credential gathering consent and similar, is through HTML. It serves HTML. So the authorization endpoint is an endpoint which waits for you to ask for a token for a certain resource, and it will handle your request by sending you HTML. And you, as an application, you have to actually play with it. You have to display it. You have a user that interacts with it, and you need to extract information from it once the interaction is over. And here is what happens. You have to redirect the user to that endpoint, preferably using like some kind of browser surface, since you are a rich client app. The system will send you back some HTML, which again could be a sign-in form, could be a sign-in form and a multi-factor form, could be an you're already authenticated, but you have to tell me if you consent for this app to access your email. And say that everything goes well. What you get back in here is what the specification defines as a code. This is just an opaque string which represents the fact that the user consented for that client to access that app. Now comes the second part. There is another endpoint called the token endpoint, which instead is used programmatically. There is no user interaction. And your application has to take that code, craft a request for the token endpoint, and finally, if everything goes well, you get back a bunch of tokens. And here they are. Now, why free? Let's see in order what they are. The one that you need is this guy, what we call the access token. The access token is the one that you need for accessing your resource. So basically what would happen is that you receive all these guys, and now when you want to talk to this guy, you just send it. And then if the token is valid, you'll get back whatever you asked for, which is great. Now, why do we need access token, access endpoint, authorization endpoint, token endpoint, and similar? Well, that access token expires very quickly. It's like lemon yogurt or similar. Like you have to eat it right away. Because within 1 hour with AID, it's gone. Why is that? Because when the Active Directory gives you that token, it's basically vouching for the validity of the information in that token. And now say that I issue that token, and then I catch that employee stealing. And then I boot the guy. And now the guy has 55 minutes of a valid token where he can go on Exchange and break havoc, steal company information, and similar. So those 55 minutes are 55 minutes of fear and tension and managers screaming. So we try to keep that time as short as possible. However, the moment in which that token is expired, if you'd have to go back to the user and say, dear user, I know it's annoying, but it's for a good cause. It's for security reasons. Can you please give me again your username and password? And guess how much uptake your application is going to get? Not much. So here, that's where it comes into play with this other token, which is what we call the refresh token. The refresh token is a token that you can present back to the token endpoint without bothering the user, without user interaction. And if the refresh token is still valid, if no employee has been caught red-handed and similar, you'll just get back a fresh access token, and then you'll be able to keep using it. So this little dual system allows for a good user experience and a decent security control over this stuff, which is great. Now, what is the value of this third one? This one is a bit of contamination from OpenID Connect. How many of you guys ever used OpenID Connect? 1, 2, 3, 3. Not too bad. How many of you ever heard about OpenID Connect? Before I said it 30 seconds ago? I'm not born yesterday, come on. Anyway, OpenID Connect, we'll talk a lot about it tomorrow, but long story short, that's a spec which layers on top of OAuth, and it has a number of interesting properties. One of these properties is the ability to ask for what you call an ID token. It is a token which describes the caller, but it is intended for the client application. Like if you look at the access token, you might find that, for example, it might be encrypted for the resource. So you as a client, you have no idea what's inside. So if you want to show like the name of the user, the address of the user, which organization it belongs to on the client, the ID token allows you to do so. It gives you enough information. So that's the value of that. Very good. So why don't we actually try it? So let's go to my friend Visual Studio. And I already wrote the application because of, how to say, it's just faster, let's face it. Otherwise, I would not be able to cover all the stuff that I need to cover. And in fact, here I would argue that, well, you'll see in a moment as soon as we see some UI. So what happens is that here I have a very, very simple application with just one page, and I am implementing that little dance from scratch. I wrote everything. All the bodies HTTP client, hitting the endpoints, doing the redirects, parsing the response, pulling out the code, showing it in the request, sending to the token, getting back the token, parsing the response, all that stuff. It's not an enormous amount of code, as you can see in here. Like I'm just scrolling for the sake of it. Like I wrote more stuff. I wrote these, I don't know, 45 minutes. Don't tell my boss, otherwise he'll expect me to be more productive than I am. So it took 2 days to write this thing. Just in case. Please cut the former part of the recording. Thank you. But anyway, right now, the plan was to just show you that I can take this guy. Let me make it a bit bigger. I said a bit, not enormous, but I trust that you can read it now. Here, as you can see, I have a number of coordinates, like authority represents the organization that I want to talk with. That's the root of the authorization endpoint, the token endpoint, like the beginning of Active Directory. And it has the tenant that I'm working with. And then I have a resource, which is the identifier of the resource that I want to talk with, which is Outlook, as you can see. And then I have a client ID, and I have redirect URIs. Now, normally, I would just take this guy, put it on the other side. Thank you, but I'm not done yet. And just to say, cut and paste this value here and this value here, just to show you that it works. But given that it will take some time, I'll trust that you trust that it works, also because it's not guaranteed that it will work. And I'll just hit F5. Like this is an application which looks exactly the same as the one that I just created. So let me make it a bit smaller. And I've put the breakpoints and the key points so that we can see what's going on. So let me start my fantastic emulator, which will take some time, which in theory I should have prepared something to say in the meanwhile, but I decided to practice my ability of saying nothing while still producing sound. I could also speak Italian, for example, just for making a bit of a differentiator. It's not working. You guys are not in a good mood today. Usually it's like, you see, that now it worked. When I call you out of it, but anyway, now the application is being deployed in here. How many of you guys saw the keynote this morning? Everybody. So what I'm using here is the super new updated to Visual Studio, which is targeting Windows Phone 8.1. And here I have my fantastic Italian design UI, which is very minimalist, in which I can hit this big invoke button. And the first thing I do, I craft by hand the URL for my authorization endpoint. As you can see here, I just pass all the coordinates, and I hit this endpoint, and then I do a redirect. So let's do a redirect. Now, what I'm using here, this web authentication broker.authenticate and continue, is a feature of Windows 8, which now is available also in Windows Phone 8.1, which provides me with the HTML surface precisely for this purpose. If I have to perform authentication, instead of instantiating a browser control, pulling it out, putting the navigator, listening for the return URL, all that stuff, now I can just call this thing, and it will put my application to sleep, show this UI, and listen to my return URI, and call me back once I'm done. So let's sign in here. Sign in as Fabio. Fabio. I didn't misspell it. Oh, no, now you're going to see my password. Did you get it? No, that's OK. No, I probably misspelled it anyway. OK, so I went back, I got back a code, and now the phone application is trying to activate back my app, saying, hey, you were waiting for that event. It's now here. And if I hit continue, he will hit this other handler, which I wrote precisely for this. And here I'll do like nothing mysterious, like it's not crypto. I'm just like parsing the response. But still, it's like lots of code, kind of annoying. And here I can let me run to cursor so that we avoid to wait for too long. And you have this request token, which is crafting the request for the token endpoint. If you remember, it's this leg. I'm now doing this leg. If I hit F5, I should have, yep. Here, as you can see again, I do a lot of building strings, parsing strings, doing requests, deserializing JSON. Again, not crypto, but still code that I have to write. And eventually here I get my response. Actually, you didn't see the code where I called exchange. As you can see in here, very simply, I just extracted the token from all these various back and forth. And now here I'm just doing a get of this very convenient address. And in this case, I'm getting all the messages that have an attachment from Fabio's inbox. And here I have just showing the dump of a JSON that I get back. So that's all for you. Not especially hard, but not too easy either, because when I'm doing the demo, it's all fun and games. I get a token, I call, I'm successful, I go home, and I earn my salary. But if you're writing that application, now in 1 hour, the access token is going to expire. So you're going to have to also retrieve a refresh token, which I ignored here. You have to save it somewhere. And then when it's time, you have to pull it out and use it. And then sometimes your resource will have a clock skew between you and the wrap. So you'll think that the token is still good. The resource will beg to differ. And so you'll go back and forth for the amount of this time, and you'll have to detect the situation. Or maybe you're calling 2 different resources. And now you have to remember 2 entirely different set of tokens and choose between the 2. So clearly possible. If you have free weekends, go ahead and do it. But we thought that perhaps there were better ways of doing it. So introducing the Active Directory Authentication Library. How many of you guys ever played with it? Many. All right. What do you think? I see a thumb up. I see nodding. My ego is getting bigger by the minute. Excellent. Now it's big enough. We can go ahead. OK. The idea of this library is that it takes all the code that you have seen in there, and it just, how to say, make it unnecessary. Also, it makes it unnecessary for you to even know that we're using OAuth. In reality, you can describe what we were doing in very simple terms. You have one resource. You have one client that wants to access this resource. You know that you have to present something to this resource in order to be authenticated and authorized. And you know that you get this something from some kind of authority. And the content of all those lines going back and forth, who cares? Those are the terms of a problem. So Azure Active Directory Authentication Library. Today, my English coprocessor is even worse than usual. I apologize. The perfect day for it, right? This library is specifically designed to allow you to think about those problems in those exact terms. It gives you terms, words, so that you can describe your problem in this way in your own code. And let me show you. Every ADAL program starts with this line. You create what we call an authentication context. An authentication context is just a concrete representation, a moniker of your directory in your code. Now, if I want to do something with my directory, I will use that instance. And what do I want to do with it? I want to get a token. We have an API for that. And here you just say context.acquire token. And I say, I want this resource. And I am this client. And what I get back is an authentication result. Very simple. So you take all of the stuff that we were doing earlier, and you just reduce it to these 2 lines of code. And it is not just the gain of simplicity. It's that in these 2 lines of code, we did a boatload of stuff behind the scenes, such as, for example, caching those tokens. We have a persistent cache where we take all this stuff and we put it in there. And of course, we just say, those are the tokens we got when you asked for this resource. And so the next time that you make exactly the same code, instead of doing the dance, if we have it in the cache, here it is. If we have it in the cache but it's expired, but we have a refresh token, we use the refresh token. And here it is, so that you don't see it. So we do a number of things that normally you'd have to do yourself. So pretty how to say, useful, very nice. And it is really a franchise, as in the high-level concepts that I described remain the same, and we have versions of this library for all the major platforms. So if you are targeting iOS, we have a Objective-C version of this thing that you just go to GitHub, you pull it in your Xcode, and you write your iOS app. And you apply the same principles that I've just shown here, just with a different syntax. If you are targeting Android, you can do the same, but in Java. If you want to do Node.js on the server side, you can go ahead and do the same, and so on and so forth. And we really tried to keep these high-level concepts constant and just use, be good citizens of the platforms that we visited and provide them in the right syntax. You don't have to write C# when you are in iOS. Although personally, I would really like it. But for me, Objective-C is somewhat a bit of a mystery. In fact, you'll see that the demo is not a miracle, but it works, or it usually does. All of this stuff is being open sourced, and all the things that today are not open source, they are not open source yet. The .NET version and the Windows Store version are in the process of being open sourced, but the Java one, the iOS one, they are already in GitHub. So you can take a look at the source, and you can, by all means, contribute. If there are features that are lacking, go ahead and add it, and we'll be eternally grateful. So let's see some of these in action. Again, here I'm going to use a pre-built application, but I could have easily just took the code, the coordinates of the app that I just created, and pasted it in here. I'm just not doing it for a matter of time. Now, this app is slightly prettier. I decided I wanted to learn a bit of XAML, so I made an effort. So we are actually doing the same thing we were doing in the Windows 8.1 phone app. I'm getting the list of attachments, but this time I'm actually showing them. Instead of the JSON, we'll actually see little images. And here you can see exactly what I was talking about earlier. Actually, let me just say, developer tenant on Microsoft.com. So here I have the same coordinates as before. I did cut and paste. And here I have one line in which I create my authentication context, the other line in which I call acquire token async, and I pass exactly the same coordinates as before. And then here I have my little function which goes and grabs all the attachments. For the ones that are images, I actually download them, and then I create my little view. Very handy. So let me hit F5 and see what happens. Slowly, slowly, but faster than before, because I don't have to boot a virtual machine. When you develop against the phone, you are actually boot one entire virtual machine. How many of you guys ever developed for Windows Phone 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Great. Are you excited about Windows 8.1? Yes. Yes. Great. Thank you. Perfect. So here, another example of Italian design. And what you see here is the same component that we got in Windows, like in the Windows Phone application. But the difference is that before, I had to make the system call. Here, it's our library, which looked at the cache, didn't find anything, didn't find a refresh token, and decided that the last resort was showing the UI. So now it's calling this UI. But if you go in another platform, the UI, which shows the authorization endpoint HTML, will be different. But the object model remains the same. So it's an implementation detail you don't need to worry about. So this time, let's be Mario. Mario. If I try to talk while I type, it's a disaster. So here we went out. We got our token. Let's actually see if we actually got our token. Yep. As you can see here in the debugger, all of that GUI, base64 GUI, is the token. If we just hit continue, audience, as you can see here, you can see yourself. Earlier, I took a picture, I sent a mail to Mario, and in the attachment there was a picture, and now, since we got the list of the pictures, ta-da! And now, actually, I'm going to turn these into an application. Don't tell my wife, because of the weekend she wanted to go out. Instead, this weekend, I'm going to take these and make it an actual application. How many times you find yourself saying, yeah, I have it in my mailbox somewhere, and you have to go through like the entire mails of the last 3 months. So this thing, there is a couple of REST calls, and ta-da, I have all this stuff. I cannot possibly be the only one that finds that useful, right? Great. So if I make it like $5, are you going to buy? Now, of course, I can't do it because it's on company time. But anyway. So now I closed it, and it's just like for fun. Here, let's say that I want to run it again. I hit invoke again. And as you can see here, I went straight, and I didn't get prompted. Why? Because I have my fantastic cache, which remembers everything. It's there in local storage. It's, of course, encrypted. So that now, for the duration of a refresh token, every time I open the app, I can just go ahead and do this call automatically. So using a library is useful. There are many other details, but in the interest of covering more stuff, I'm not going to touch on them. But I hope I made the point that it's easier to use a library rather than code off directly. Did I successfully make that point? Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't asking for it. But I will not complain. OK, so let's see if I manage to do something with this guy. It might be 5. Now I'm going to show you, not, of course, the same level of polish, but yes, it is a skeptical view. I took that picture 5 minutes after I opened it and saying, how does this work? Look, got the picture. So here, let me grab Xcode. You're going to see in action the iOS version of ADAL. I'm hoping that there are no secrets in here. And I hope that everything will go well, because if something goes wrong, I have no idea what to do. I am still a bit clumsy in this environment, and also my command of the of the Objective-C is still not fantastic. How many of you guys are iOS developers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. OK, so everybody else are the same boat as me, right? But for you guys, as you can see, there is authentication context. It's the same as the other one, but it follows the convention of the name of the library before. So it's a de-authentication context. I have my acquire token, which follows the convention that the first parameter is in the name of the method, so with resource. So in the end, if you know how to reason about the problem, it doesn't matter that you use the C# version or the iOS version. You'll reuse the same skills, and you'll just find yourself at home in your own library. So here, let me hit play. Build succeeded, which is already a big step forward. And unfortunately, the projector kind of likes to make things big, but it works. So let's be Fabio again. You know what's the problem with this thing? That I have no idea. Here it is. If I misspell stuff. And then again, now you're going to see my password. This is terrible. Let's see. Let's do it again. Let's see if this time you can get it. Did you get it this time? Oh, no, I'm ruined. You know my password. So as you can see here, error is nil, which is always a good thing. That's what I've learned about Objective-C. When error is nil, you're in a good place. But more seriously, like we got back all the data, behaved in exactly the same way as the former one. And as you can see in here, we also have a cache. In fact, here I have this line for cleaning the cache every time I run this so that you can actually see the prompt otherwise. And if I just let this thing go further, you'll see that here there is the same dump that I got on Windows Phone. So as you can see, we actually work there as well. And we're back. Perfect. OK, so now things will get interesting. Say that you want to protect your own APIs. Here, let me ease your cognitive overload by releasing this stuff progressively. As we mentioned at the very beginning, usually all of the providers give you a token because they want you to access their own resources. So again, once you get a token from Facebook, which is my favorite consumer system, like, I don't know if you guys saw these in the States, but in Italy now it's big to have this, you are from town X if, and it's a Facebook group, and people that participate in there, they do Amarcord, they share pictures, saying events that happened, like, I remember the big flood of '89, stuff like that. Well, of course, I am from a small town in Italy, so I am in one of those groups. And since I'm the guy who went to America, I am the one that, when they want to do something, they just call me and say, Vittorio, do X, like Patronus Facebook. And, OK. And they ask me to write the thing that saves the tokens, like saves the archive of the entire group. And it was super easy. Like, you get the token from Facebook, you call the graph. It was just like calling the graph of Active Directory, so great. So I'm not suggesting in any way which is bad, that Facebook gives you a token for its own. It's just a standard practice. Now, Active Directory, although, is not just something that is for protecting our own offering, Office 365 and similar, but it is first and foremost your directory, something that you own. And you own your own resources, so clearly, exactly like your on-prem Exchange and your on-prem SharePoint, you want to protect it in there, but you also want to protect your own apps that you wrote, your own services that you wrote. You want to do the same in the cloud. And the good news is, it's just a matter to tell AAD how to think about your resources, and the exact same mechanism that we have seen earlier will apply. It's easy. Could be easier. Right now, we are in preview, so there are a bit of arcane things that you have to do. But we'll fix them. Like, the concept is super, super easy. First, you have to go and create an entry for your app, of course. Exactly like we did for the client, if you have a web API, you do the same, but you just say this is a server-side application, and you'll have your entry. The second thing is, since this is a resource, you have to let Active Directory know what are the things that people can do with this resource. And you do that by simply uploading a file which contains a description of these. And that's the part that today is a bit, how to say, you have to download this file, edit it, and upload it. And we'll make it better. But for you to try and to give us feedback, that should already be enough. And then finally, you actually have to put something in front of your web application so that it can request tokens, and once it receives a token, tell the good ones from the bad ones apart. Like you need to know, yeah, this is a token from the directory, it's not expired, nobody tampered with it, and so on and so forth. And again, it's very straightforward. So let's start with adding an entry. I could just go in the portal and create an entry like I did before, but there is an easier way. In Visual Studio 2013, we have templates for creating web APIs. Those templates are integrated with ADAL for .NET, so that the moment in which you create the application, you can say, this web API is going to be protected by this instance of Windows Azure Active Directory. And in the process of that, this system will acquire a token for writing against the directory using the Graph API, create the entry automatically for you, so that at this point, you are completely done. You don't need to really go and do extra steps, apart from the manifest step, which I described earlier. So let's do it, actually, since it's going to be reasonably fast. Let me close these other guys, since they are taking precious memory. Bye. And let me create a new application. Slowly, slowly, but surely. OK, let's start a new project. I choose ASP.NET. I'll call it like Mega App. And here I can choose Web API. I can say that I want to change the authentication type. And here under organizational account, I have a number of options. And here I will say that I want to create this API for my developer tenant. Developer tenant, Microsoft.com, and also save it. Now, as soon as I hit OK, Visual Studio tries to get a token for writing in the directory this entry. And since Visual Studio doesn't have any rights in itself, it will borrow mine. It asks me to sign in as somebody who has rights for the directory. So let's be the admin. OK. So now Visual Studio is equipped to go to the directory, get back a token, and use it for calling the directory APIs to create an entry for my app. Now here it goes, it downloads everything it needs to download. Half the internet in form of NuGet packages. How many of you guys use NuGet? Lots. It's really great. But for the templates, I suspect that my ASP.NET friends decided to have all of the possible NuGets just in case. And so when you create this project, there is this green bar that goes and goes and goes. But it's done. Great. So now I can go back to the portal. I can go to my list of applications. And if I refresh it, because everything is client-side, so it didn't really pick it up. Slowly, slowly, but surely. And eventually. Can we add it in the recording so that it looks that it happened right away? Yes? OK. Excellent. As you can see here, there is now my entry, which was created programmatically by Visual Studio. And now, if we go back to what we were discussing earlier, now we need to tell to Active Directory, what are the things that you can do with this application? And specifically, the basic case is I want what we call user impersonation. When a user calls this thing, I just want the user to be himself or herself. And the way in which you do it is you come in here, you can download this manifest. It usually likes to save it in like some weird thing. Let me call it mega JSON. And then we can just take a quick peek at what's inside. It's a complete description of, wow, this font is small. Let's make it enormous, 16. Look at that. Of course, the tree is too small. So here there is there are descriptions of all the things that by default are in there, but what's not in there by default is these app permissions. And you just need to paste in there in a specific format the permissions that you want. And here I have one example of a permission, which you can just go there and paste. And it will not go into the details what's in there. The message is, you get in here, you make Control-C, you go there, you go Control-V, you save it, you upload it. It will get better. This is just because it's the preview. And now, given that I have still very little time, unfortunately, I created like this elaborated thing in which I wanted to show you that when you want to validate a token, like as an app, you receive a token, you have to validate it. What does it mean to validate it? Let's see if I manage to do it really quickly. Like inside the token, you have a bunch of base64 stuff. This base64 stuff is like the token in itself in blue. The red part is a signature. And one part of validating the token is verifying the signature. And you do it using this key. There is a key which is published by Active Directory and is used by our software here, which was added automatically in Visual Studio to verifying that key. And then the other two things that you verify in here, like here there's the actual content decoded from the token, in which you can see that there is a part which says this token is for your app. So you need to verify that's true. Otherwise, that would be just like receiving a check for somebody else. In the check, there must be pay to your app. And then there is the issuer, which is a way of saying, yep, this is coming from Contoso as opposed to Fabrica. So our software, which gets added automatically, does exactly that. It's what we call an OWIN middleware. And you configure it very simply. You just add that snippet of code at the beginning of your app, and you pass the audience, which is one of the things that you get from the portal, which is the identifier of your app, and then the tenant, which is your directory. And this thing automatically reaches out for the document and does the check for you. So very, very, very straightforward. And we will not see the demo, but that would have been just like calling the other APIs, but instead of exchange, you would have gotten value 1, value 2. So even less interesting. Multi-tenancy, we'll skip it. So all that we have seen today can be used with the free features of Azure Active Directory. And nothing of the stuff that is in there is impossible to use. You just go to those addresses, and you will find samples. You will find the source code of the libraries, or you'll find the bits of the library. And you can reproduce all the stuff that I've done, hopefully pretty easily. And my hope is that in this 1 hour in which you endured my very heavy accent, for which I apologize, is that I managed to show you that with with Azure Active Directory, now it's Microsoft Azure, with Microsoft Azure Active Directory, you have expressive power of describing the kind of resources which you use today, and you have the necessary tools for consuming those resources on all the platforms that you decided to target. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.